and welcome back to my channel. So I have been putting off filming this video for a while because I just wasn't really sure how to do it. So this is my 2019-2020 end of year teacher bullet journal reflection video, and I think in the past I've done it more as like a top-down film where I show you guys, you know, how the end of the school year went. But honestly, this year was so weird, and I feel like that style is getting a little bit boring because I don't really change anything up, that I wanted to just do a little like vlog recap and chat about the end of the school year. So I think that I did my 20-week update while we were on lockdown, actually. I think it's been a minute, like I don't remember. But so I think I actually did a video on the 20-week update on lockdown, and I did a video after that I will try to remember to link up here for you guys on how I moved my classes online. And with the end of the school year, I just wanted to kind of chat about how things went and think about how to do things for next year. So I do actually have my notebooks with me. I probably won't really show you inside them just because honestly, you guys have seen in my teacher bullet journal, it's weeklies, like it's literally all the same. I think when I did my moving classes online video, I mentioned that I was using scrap paper to organize my lessons. I actually, after like 2 weeks, basically went back into my Prof Bujo and I just wrote what I was doing on the class times. Even though I send out information based on the week, I just like kind of wrote down like, this is what this hour is going to do, this is what this hour is going to do. So I ended up using my teacher bullet journal all through the end of the school year. It actually worked out really well. So that's nice to know that if for whatever reason next year we have to go back to doing at least some of our hours online, I can still use the setup that I've been using that I like and all of that in order to help organize my classes. So that was a really good thing. The other thing is, because I was tracking so much more work than I do on an in-person basis, I did use my little sheets like this that I basically just did a grid. So down the left I had the kids' names, and across the top I had the week and the name of the assignment, and then I could go through and just check off as I was doing it. So in terms of organization and like not losing track of who had done what, that was actually also really effective. But again, that wasn't like a long-term solution. I literally did it on the back of pages I had already printed on, and it's just like stuck in my grade book because I don't know what to do with it yet. I think I might actually save it. I do have a couple of documents that I save at the end of every school year that I just like to have as a record, and I think this is going to be one of them. Not because I need to know specifically what each kid did, but just because it was such a weird situation that I feel like in a couple of years it'll be nice to have that record like filled out and kind of see what I actually did in case it comes up again. I don't know. So the biggest thing for the end of the school year, so basically what has happened since the week 20 update, is we actually went from completely online classes to partially back in person, where we had half a class one week and half a class the other week, and then back to like full. So I kind of want to just like go through how that transition worked in terms of like planning and that kind of stuff. So I will say that the overall system that I had set up for my in-person teaching actually worked really well. It worked in my favor in terms of moving everything online. So because the amount of like true lesson planning that I do in my notebooks is fairly minimal, it's really just a placeholder to like remind me what I'm working on. But because most of my actual lesson planning is digital, it was not that difficult for me to move online. I think the biggest thing, and the thing that took the most time, was that I didn't want to just send my students the PowerPoints that I use in class, because those PowerPoints are really designed to have, you know, the documents, and oftentimes if, you know, I give them photocopies, for example, I don't have photocopies in color. So if we have any images, anything like that, I like to have the image in color on my PowerPoint. You know, if they're using the book, great, then I put the questions up there, but it's really not, my PowerPoints are not designed as like a do-it-yourself kind of thing. They're really there for me to guide them through that, but so that they have that visual aid as we're talking about the material. And so I didn't feel comfortable just, you know, sending them the PowerPoint with like, okay, here's like this unit, it's going to take us X number of weeks, or like, here's the PowerPoint slides for this particular week, like work through this stuff, here's the page numbers and whatever. I just didn't really feel comfortable doing that. I thought it would be too overwhelming. It wouldn't give them enough guidance in terms of like working through the material. And so the thing that did take me the longest, and it was one thing that so this was something that I showed you guys in that video, was I opted to use Google Forms for the majority of the work that I sent my students. And there are a couple of downsides. I think the biggest downside, biggest two. One, if kids don't have access to internet, they can't do the work. Like, that is a huge problem. I will say, however, that in my school, that is not a very common issue. I think that out of all of my kids, maybe, and I have 190, or I had 190 students this year, I think maybe 2 or 3 were unable to get online to do the work. And it was probably even less than that. I had kids who could get on some of the time, but maybe not all of the time, but most of my kids had access to some form of internet in order to do the Google Forms that I sent most of the time. So that was like, that is definitely a consideration depending on where you work, but in terms of the situation at my school, that was not a huge concern. It was a little bit of a concern, but not a huge one. The second thing that was, I think, probably the biggest thing that I would potentially change if this happened again is, because the kids are doing the work on Google Forms, they send it to me and I have a document of their responses, but they are not actually writing anything down physically. They're typing all of the stuff down and sending it to me, but they're not taking the time to like take notes in their notebook. And I can understand that because that is double work, but that is a real pitfall of using Google Forms, and that they don't have that document of what work they actually did for the future. So for example, when we came back to school and we were talking about what they had just done in the previous unit, for some of the kids, it was like, I remember we did some things, but like, I don't know what it was. You know what I mean? That was definitely something I need to think about if this were to happen again. I think I still want to use Google Forms. I think that's a really good thing, but maybe what I need to do is turn on, because I think there's a function that you can like turn on that it sends them a copy of their responses. And I think that's what I would have to do. And I didn't turn that on for this one. So that, you know, that was my bad. But I think that's something that I would do, because yes, they did the work, and yes, in the moment they were like, you know, working actively on this material, but then after the fact, they had no trace that like it was work that they had done. So that was definitely a huge pitfall. Now, the good stuff, it was really easy for me to see who had done the work and to go through and see what kind of information they had. Now, I did not systematically check the responses for every single question for every single student. As I mentioned before, I had 190 students. It was a lot. But what I would do is I would just kind of spot check and just make sure that they weren't putting in nonsense, and that like overall it seemed like they were on the right track. And then I would send out corrections the following week so that they could check their answers for like the general thing. And I would always write, you know, these are suggested responses, or like if you have something similar, that's fine, or you know what, like just something general like that, unless it was something that was very clearly like a right or a wrong answer, like some of the grammar exercises that they did. So that actually I think helped. It was a significant amount of time just like tracking everything, because I wanted to, one of the things that I think is really important is if I'm asking them to do the work and I'm saying like, this is something you have to do, then I need to show that I'm holding them accountable to actually doing it. Otherwise, they're not going to do it. And so I think that that was really, I had a really high percentage of kids that did the work, that I think that that accountability really did help. And it was something that I tried really hard to not do. So it was basically, if you did the work, you're getting credit for it. If you didn't do the work, then I had a running list on a different document that I kept up to date. So I basically would do the assignment name, whatever the document was. So if it was a Google form, if they had to go to FLIPGRID to do something, if it was just a Google document that I shared with them. And then I had the kids who hadn't done it, and I would keep that up to date. I would check in on it, you know, every couple of days, every week, and like update it with the kids who had actually done it. I would erase their name from the document so they could see exactly how much missing work they had. And it was not something that I did, like, I tried really hard to not make it be like, you didn't do this work, like you need to do this, you're slacking off or whatever. I did it as, if you haven't done the work, here's the list, like, you know, please do it. If you want to, you can like get those points back. Ultimately, we didn't have any grades for third trimester, so any of the grades that I did do ultimately didn't count. But at least while they were still visible for the kids, they could see like a direct link between doing the work and getting credit for it. So I do think that that was something that was really good about using Google Forms, that if I had done a different method, it would have been a much larger time commitment in terms of keeping up with it than what it was. So I really did enjoy doing that. I also like the fact that with Google Forms, I can go through and I can add different sections, so I can guide them a little bit better than if I were to just give them the PowerPoint. So that was definitely a good thing. Where I kind of ran into problems, if you will, was when we went back to school. So the way that my school did it, and the way that most schools in France did it, at least for a while, was we basically had 1 week where, because we could only have 15 kids in a classroom, so and basically all of my classes are 30 kids or more. So what we did is we had 15 kids 1 week, and the other 15 stayed home, and then the next week that swapped. And in terms of deciding how to deal with my curriculum, it was a bit complicated. And what I ultimately ended up doing, and I don't know that this is the right way to do it, it's just one way to do it. What I ultimately ended up doing was I opted to do activities in class that were the kind of things that were really hard for me to do online. So doing sort of review games where it's really hard to do that by yourself. And I did send them some websites where they could do some sort of review games themselves, but it was all up to the student to do it. Whereas if I do it in class, I can kind of help them out if they need like a hint or something. I can like check in on the progress and all of that. So I did those kinds of things. I also did more like oral participation. We worked on picture description, which is something that, like, yes, I could have them do it online, but it's a little bit tougher to do than some of the other types of activities. So that was kind of what I focused on in class. And because of that, I didn't send that work as makeup work for the kids who weren't in class that week. What I basically did is I planned my lessons to be 2 weeks long, right? So I did first group of kids and then the second group of kids, and I did the same thing for those 2 weeks, and then I was going to have a second batch where I did the same thing for the next 2 weeks. And that meant that the kids who were at home, I didn't send them that work, and I did specifically send them, I kept sending out like a little letter that just kind of explained everything, and I very specifically said, like, you know, you're not going to make up this work that I'm doing in class because you guys are going to do it next week when you're here. I did say for kids who weren't coming back to school at all, because they did come back on a voluntary basis, I did say, especially for my high schoolers, if they weren't coming back at all, to send me an email, and I would send them the PowerPoint that I was doing in class. No, it's not ideal, but at least they could have the same information that everybody else had. I just didn't want to send it in like the general way, because the kids who were going to come back to school, I wanted them to do that work with me. So what I did for the kids who were at home is I basically collected a couple of sites to do review games and review activities. So some were just grammar exercises, some were review games, some were, for older kids, for example, were places where they could watch videos in English. Some places they could listen to audio documents, they could read texts, do that kind of stuff to revise at home. I also suggested some things that they could revise from their notebooks from things that we had done earlier in the year. And it wasn't ideal because it meant that the kids who were at home didn't have as much work to do, just by nature. You know, it was very autonomous for them. But ultimately, I decided that after having, 2.5 months of just doing online stuff, I really wanted to take advantage of the time that we had in class to do things that were just very difficult for them to do on their own, and that they really just needed to be there in person. So that was kind of the way that I adapted that. We then actually had 1 week where we had all of the kids together, and that was a little bit tough because the kids had to wear masks in class. They couldn't move around. We were all there. It was hot and all of that kind of stuff. So we did continue doing review stuff as much as possible, but it was definitely not as ideal as having the half class. It was actually really nice having the half class for a while because we could really focus on things that it's much harder for me to do with 30 kids. So yeah, it was a weird end of the school year. It was nice that we could see the kids again before they left for the summer holidays. I actually didn't see all of my classes though, because the way some of my classes work, I have a mix of kids from different classes. So basically the way it works is you have a class, right? So all the kids in that class are together for the majority of their classes. So for example, they would all do like English, French, science, math, all of those things, PE, for example, all of those they would do together. And then they might have some electives that they would be with kids from other classes. So I teach an elective class in 3 different levels. And so with those 3 levels, because it was a mix of kids from multiple classes, those were the classes that we basically had to stop doing in person because the rule was that you couldn't mix kids from different classes. You tried to keep that contained unit. And so those kids I didn't really see for the rest of the school year, but the kids that I saw in just regular English where they have the entire class, it was really nice to have those half groups because I could do things that would just be kind of chaotic, overly chaotic to do with 30 kids. So that was kind of how the end of the school year went. In terms of next year, I am still trying to figure out how I want to actually film a video to show you guys my teacher bullet journal for next year. If you guys remember, I'm actually I have designed my own notebook in InDesign that I will be printing out and binding myself, so much like I did my bullet journal for 2020. And I've actually already designed it, and I kind of got in a groove and didn't think to screen record or anything like that while I was working on it, so I don't have any process footage for how I did it. So I have been putting off that video for a while because I'm just not entirely sure what I want to do. I don't really need to do the binding portion of it because I already did that with my bullet journal. But suffice to say that my bullet journal for next year is going to be very similar to the one from this year. It's just that I'm going to print it out so I will not have to hand draw all of my spreads, because honestly doing 12 monthlies and 36 weeklies takes a long time, and while I really like the setup, it's just not really worth my time to hand draw them every single year. So what I've done is I basically have set up the spreads so that what I can do is I can go back into the masters and change. The only things I really am going to have to change are on my cover page is to update the school year, and on my monthlies to update the count, the year. So for example, I actually typed in, August 2020. So next year I'll just have to change 2020 to 2021. So I have very minimal changes that I'll have to make on the masters before I print it out for the next year. But for the most part, all of the actual spreads are drawn, and I'm just gonna have to write in the date. So on the monthlies, I'll just have to write in, the little day of the week. On the weeklies, I'll just have to write in the month and the day and the week up at the top. But the timetable is already in, all of my spreads are already in like that. I'm also adding an attendance gradebook to my teacher bullet journal. So normally I use this little A5 one, and I really like it. I find it to be very useful in terms of keeping track of attendance and homework. But because my bullet journal is going to be A5, I decided that it would be worth trying for a year to combine the two so that I would have one fewer notebook, because I currently have 3 notebooks. So basically next year, these two are going to be combined in an A5 size, and I do still actually want to buy this size. In terms of tracking grades, I like having the bigger squares, and I like just having more space. So I really do enjoy having the A4 size, and that's one that I can't physically make at home because you need A3 paper to do it. So I am going to look into purchasing this. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten around to it yet, so I need to go soon before they run out of stock. Hopefully they still have them, otherwise I will figure something else out. But that is kind of what I will be doing for next year. It's really not going to be that different. So if you guys have any questions on teaching stuff that you would like to see me make a video on, please let me know down below, because I don't always think of the things that would be interesting for you guys, because it's something that I just have been doing for long enough that I don't think about it. And so there might be content that I should be making that I'm just it hasn't occurred to me to do so. So that is my little recap for this school year. I figured it would just be easier to do a vlog style since it was such like a weird school year and you guys have seen inside these notebooks so frequently. So I will link the series page from my website. You can also go into the playlist for this year for all of my teacher bullet journal stuff, but I do have a specific series page so you can have all of the videos from this particular school year's teaching stuff. And yeah, if you guys have any comments or questions, let me know down below, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye. Hey guys, so if you've made it all the way to the end of this video and are actually watching my end screen and you're not subscribed to my channel, I would really appreciate it if you would. There's a little button right there for you to do it. And if you're interested in watching some more of my videos, I have links to 2 of my older videos off to the left there, so you can check those out if you would like to, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.